Hey there! Let's listen to the global voices in drones and development. These are a series of masterclasses, interviews, and discussion on the use of drones and drone-based technologies for sustainable development and social impact. So let's get started.
Okay, well, thank you very much, and welcome everyone. Yeah, again, thank you for having me. A great introduction. I'm a co-founder of Ajuno. We support organisations to adopt and exploit new drone capability, and we are myself. As per the introduction, I'm a chartered engineer and pilot. Supported national infrastructure, emergency services, and defence and security for a number of years to adopt new and novel drone capabilities. That includes leading development of novel autonomous aircraft and integration of new sensors and payloads, alongside kind of safety aspects such as developing complex safety arguments, such as for beyond visual line of sight. So today, the aim is really to focus on giving you a route to confidently and successfully adopt new drone capability. And I'm talking about this because the number of engagements I've had, there's so much potential with drones, but actually it's somewhat daunting, particularly if you're adopting new capability for the first time. But actually, if you're any new capability, the industry is changing so quickly and developing so quickly. How do you stay at the forefront there? So I'm going to talk a little bit about the common challenges, and then explore a framework for kind of successful drone capability adoption. This is relevant whether you're doing this for kind of your first drone or your 50th, or adopting a new sensor or capability. But it's also relevant to those developing those solutions, etc., to have a think about how they can help organizations to adopt their systems more effectively. So those common challenges, I guess fundamentally I'll summarize them in these three kind of statements as such. So knowing what systems to use is often the biggest challenge. There's such a breadth of different aircraft types, sensor types, wider capabilities, and how do you know? And they're all developing all of the time. So how do you know which is best for you? And once you do, almost always there's an inevitable investment required. So that will require a business case. How do you make that business case if you haven't used drones before, and or even if you have, but it's a new capability, and so you're not quite sure how to make that case? And then finally, you might have done both those things, but how do you actually go about taking that kind of theoretical, I know what I want to do, but how do I actually go and do that successfully and integrate that into my ways of working in a way that gets me that benefit as soon as possible, and maximizes that benefit and minimizes the risks of doing so. So the framework that we're going to talk through today addresses each of those aspects. And so in big handfuls, it starts with understanding what do you want the drone to do, then understanding what should that capability look like, discussing the business case side of things as highlighted just now, and then actually how do you develop and integrate, and how do you build from there. So these are the 4 steps we're going to talk through today. Before I jump into it, I just want to talk about why. So it's a really important question. Why should we be looking at this, and what's this based on? This is drawing from systems engineering, and the most common kind of model within systems engineering is the V life cycle. You may or may not be familiar with this, but it's fundamentally used for complex systems integration and development of systems, whether they're really complex or actually quite simple, all over the world, for everything from satellites to submarines, and was really pioneered by NASA. And I'll give an example about how NASA uses it successfully in a second. But the challenges with the systems engineering approach is it's very linear. And you go from kind of left to right over a long time period. As I said, satellites, submarines, these things have a long development life cycle. How do we apply those principles, that focusing on user needs and applying a structured approach to drones, which is developing so quickly? And I think we need to take the elements from kind of agile development methodology, and that's what this is really about. Is about taking that systems approach but doing it in an iterative, agile manner. So why is this? You may or may not have heard of systems engineering. Why is this valuable? Why is this something to look at? So this was some research that NASA did a little while ago, but basically what they highlighted was that wherever they spent more on systems engineering, so on understanding their needs and planning at that front end, it led to ultimately those are the projects that delivered more on time and cost. And so that's really why we can see it's so valuable for integrating more complex systems. So the first step within this process is defining what you want to do and what do you want that drone to do. And I break this down into three aspects. The first is really quite simple. So defining a clear and concise outcome. Ideally in a single statement of, sometimes you call this as a single statement of user need. So ideally it's a sentence, it's clear, it's specific. And that's your why that you build everything from. What are we trying to achieve? That's the reason we're doing it, and what we want to see happen. I'll expand on these next two elements because there's a bit more to them. But so next is, pardon me. Next is about understanding and describing how that drone is going to operate, and then actually using that to define your needs in a bit more detail, your requirements. And I'll expand on that in a second. So describing how you expect the drone to operate is best done, from experience of doing this at a number of organizations, is best done in a picture, really, and perhaps with supporting text. This is an example, and it's quite a basic example, but I thought because it's Amazon's was submitted as part of their FAA permissions filing, and this demonstrates you talking through and thinking through the stages of that operation. Really, actually, you ideally would go beyond this in kind of both sides of it. So thinking about the trigger that is the reason for you to want to use a drone, and the flight planning at the front end, but also the kind of return flight, etc. You think about that full operation. Often we talk about this as a concept of operations. What are the stages within that operation? And that allows you to visualize things and understand how you're going to use them, and allows you to define your needs. And this is so in systems engineering speak, this is your requirements, which many of you will be familiar with the term, and it's so critical to everything that builds from here, and you'll see this in a sec. Really, you've got functional requirements and non-functional requirements. So your functionals, for example, actually I need the system to have a flight time of this, or and often it's good to set a threshold. This is what we need to achieve, and then a stretch. And this is kind of a basic format, but if you can do this, even it could take you half an hour, it could take you a month, depending on what level of detail you want to go to. So the functionals, so what should the system be able to do, and the non-functionals, such as so your training, your safety, security, maintainability, those types of aspects. The really important thing with defining requirements is prioritizing them. So requirements, you'll often start and say, well, I want this and this and this, and you end up with a long shopping list, and actually it's a big trade-off because you can't have all of it. So it's about understanding what you think your priorities are, and then coming back round to them again. And this is you might not get that concept to operation, you might not get these requirements right first time. That's the beauty of an iterative approach of why it's so valuable. So what should the capability look like? And I'm not going to go into detail about this because actually, well, we could talk for a long time about this. But we like to consider it in a kind of three aspect model. So systems, people and processes, and then safety and regulation. And all of these are wholly integrated and interrelated. It's about just trying to separate them a little bit so that you can think about things in different clear ways. And The important thing about this model as well is that it avoids you getting focused just on the technology, which is often what it's the new exciting shiny thing. I look at this sensor, isn't that amazing? Look at this drone, isn't it amazing? But what you need to be doing is thinking about the breadth. So from a systems perspective, actually you might be focused on the aircraft and the payload, often a sensor, visual RGB sensor in most cases, but also the ground control station. But you should also be thinking about those wider kind of complementary systems. So a unified traffic management system, which means different things to different people, but is about integrating into wider airspace. The people and the processes. So what people, what training, what flight management and planning are you going to be doing, etc. And then the safety and regulation side, often the bare minimum is to have some sort of operations manual to say how you plan to operate the system, who's doing what are your clear processes, with some level of safety considerations. But ideally, you'll have a more robust safety case which expands on the risk, etc. My background is largely aviation safety, so I usually expand a lot more on that, but I'll hold for now, conscious of time. So the third aspect, how should I make that business case? And this is, I mean, a business case fundamentally, as I'm sure we're all aware, is about focusing on needs and or focusing on benefits and invested costs, and considering the functions that you replace is the most effective way I've found, or we found, to do this. So for example, my drone is replacing scaffolding to deliver these benefits. I'm not going to talk through them, but again, this is a great model. Often you consider the quality or the performance, the outcome of that system to be the same, and then you can consider these aspects: time, cost, safety and sustainability, and how they provide benefit. The one that we often chat, well, that people struggle with most is the cost aspect. So how do I, what sort of trials and integration, how do I break down that cost from a kind of trials and integrations of that into service versus the operational aspects? And it's important just to split them separately, and fundamentally that comes down to payback. So you might have a lower operational cost and a higher trials and integration cost, but that's fine as long as you have a longer time period. And each of these, again, you can consider that model that we looked at just now to break down the different systems that feed into that cost. So finally, the fourth aspect and the final aspect is how to develop and integrate that new capability. So the key aspect here, as I kind of highlighted at the beginning, is to be using an iterative approach. And so we break that down into kind of planning, testing, and reviewing. And I'll talk about that now. And it's about focusing first on a minimum viable capability. So I'm sure many of you are familiar with a minimum viable concept, minimum viable product. So developing something with the minimum resources that's going to deliver you value. Having, as I said at the beginning, hopefully you've got something, a capability in your mind's eye. Have a think now about actually what is the most basic form of that. If I consider the systems, the people, the processes, it might be that I'm not operating beyond visual line of sight. I'm operating just close by. I might be operating for only a short period of time during the day rather than a long overnight, etc. That you get the idea. Testing it is then a case of actually this is where those requirements are really valuable, because you come back and you say, okay, what are my test measures and what was my result? I can look back against what I wanted to achieve and fundamentally prioritize. And in this case, you can see that my image resolution, I've said actually on review, it didn't do well enough. But actually it was an essential in terms of priority. So that's where I'm going to focus on that next iteration. As I go into that next cycle as such, we're going to focus on image quality, and it allows you to keep focused and deliver some sort of benefit sooner through this iterative approach. So in summary, I've talked through this framework fundamentally. So focusing on what you want that drone to do first, then scoping out and understanding what the capability looks like. We talked about some of the potential ways to make that business case, understanding the model, the benefits model, and splitting costs into service and operational across those elements, and then finally using an iterative approach, feeding back to those requirements in order to understand and refine that approach. So I guess my key takeaway is to successfully adopt new drone capability, try and focus on an agile systems approach. So hopefully that was of value. And I now welcome any questions from anyone. I'm not sure how much time we've got left.
If anyone has questions, please put it in the chat box. Until then, sir, there's a question. How do you analyze whether a particular project or a cause or a, like, let's say a concept has got an implementable result?
Sorry, the line's not fantastic. Can you just repeat that one more time, please?
Like, how do you analyze whether a particular project or a use case or, let's say, a concept has got implementable results?
If it's implementable results, was that?
Yeah, right.
It's a good question. So, so how do you analyze if a project has implementable results? I guess for me, again, I come back to this iterative approach. If you've defined clearly what you intend to achieve, and then you've used that kind of requirements methods to highlight and importantly define what are the key measures that we're going to look at. As long as you keep things small in that first kind of iteration, that minimum viable concept capability, that allows you to test as soon as possible. Really, that's the best thing. That's the best response I'd give to that. Really, hopefully that makes sense and has answered the question.
Thank you, sir, for answering. So there's another question. Like, what are the different user and system requirements that you would require for any project?
That's a great question. So I think what's the difference? What are the different user and system requirements that you require? I think it's probably worth just talking about quickly what the difference between user and system requirements are. So here I focused on requirements as a general concept, but we have fundamentally you can break that down into first user requirements, which are what does the end user actually want to achieve, what do they want to see as an outcome. So that might be, I want this output over this amount of time, and then what does that mean from a system perspective? So agnostic to any specific solution, what does the system need to be able to achieve? So if you've said, actually, I want to be able to fly this number of times over the course of a week, that might break down to say, all right, I need a specific flight time of this. I need a flight speed of this, for example. I need to be able to carry this payload. That allows you to break things into more detail. So what are the key ones? That's a very big question. I think it's too big a question, to be honest, to define the breadth of them. I pulled up a couple of examples there. I guess it's thinking about what is most important to you, and that's that value of doing the concept of operation, defining that what the operation looks like at the beginning. Hopefully that answered the question.
Thank you so for answering. There's another question. So how can one ensure that he's getting the latest and the most suitable system or technology?
Another good question. So how can you make sure you've got that the latest technology or latest systems of that capability model, that left-hand side? How do you make sure what you're getting is the best? There's no magic bullet, as with all of these things, or free magic bullet. I guess there's a lot of information out there at the moment on blogs and various posts about what the latest systems are. you can obviously engage experts to help you in that sort of space. I think one of the aspects that is often most difficult is understanding what's not in publicly available. So what's still being developed, for example, but might really suit your needs, but need a little bit of bringing together. And one thing I'd kind of note is Airwards. I'm not sure how. Hopefully you're all well aware, but so Airwards is the first global drone awards, and they capture fantastic, innovative, responsible, and impactful use cases from around the world. Organizations like that have a really good understanding of what their latest capabilities under development are, and it gives you a means to understand them. So hopefully, again, I've answered the question there, and yeah, thank you.
Thank you, sir, for answering the question. Do you have any more questions?
I guess we can move more questions to the chat. Thank you so much, Will, for being part of the conference, for accepting my invitation, and for giving such an awesome presentation. I hope everybody would have a great takeaway home. And I really hope that you gather a lot of value from this conference as well. And I also hope that we continue to working together, learning together in the future as well. Thank you so much, Will. And everyone, you're most welcome to continue your questions in the chat. And we have linked Will's email address and LinkedIn on the conference platform. So you all can definitely continue conversations with Will for your business, for your applications and projects. Thank you so much, Will.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone. Let's get in touch.
Hey there. Thank you for listening to Global Voices in Drones and Development. We will be releasing at least one new episode every week, and that would be on a Saturday. So please do tune in. And you're most welcome to join the Global Alliance on Drones and Development, where we would be having podcasts, videos, masterclasses, meetings, discussions, and much more. So see you around. Thank you for listening.